I'm Hemrick Nathan Salley, Jr. of Salley, South Carolina. I was born September the 27th, 1935. I apologize for my appearance. I did not plan to have this tape made, but I think it's sort of necessary. This gentleman is doing this for me because this tape that I had of Daddy's 100th birthday party for some reason did not record but about 3 minutes or so, and I wanted to let you know that Daddy was born May the 6th, 1903, and so this would have been somewhere in May of 2003. And Mother was born, my father was Hemrick Nathan Salley, Sr. of Salley, South Carolina, and was a 7th generation Salley, and I'm an 8th generation Salley. And Mother was born January the 5th, 1907, and this was her 96th birthday party with Papa. They had been married, I think it was 69 years, but Daddy lived to be 101 and a half, and Mother 96, lacking 2 months of being 97. They were married 72 years together. And my mother was Ina Boylston Salley, spelled B-O-Y-L-S-T-O-N. And they came to Salley in 1750, her ancestors, and my father's ancestors came to Salley in 1735. And my genealogy for the Salleys are the following. The first Salley that came was Henry Salley, and his wife was a von Ark. So we were Swiss Germans and came on a private boat with a land grant from King George II to the central part of South Carolina, and our family ended up with 50,000 acres. Some families still have a great portion of land. Mr. Briggs Salley Jr. living today, this is 2010, had from 5,000 to 7,000 acres. We had about 2,000, but we sold ours down. I was an only child, and I'm the last of my living line, and I have just 2 third cousins in Salley now, Miss Joyce Salley and Ernest Salley. And I have one first cousin on the Boylston side, which is Frances Davis Knowles. Her mother was Kathleen Boylston, my mother's sister. I want to say the first Salley was Henry. Then the second Salley was Martin, and his wife was a Jan, Y-O-N, and that was pronounced Jon. They were also Swiss Germans in that same group that came. And some other of those Swiss German names were the Salleys, the Islers, the Schulers, the Wannamakers, the Giesenhanners, the Rickenbackers, Anabnet, Ziegler, Sturkey, and many of more of those names. And they all had these land grants from King George II. But you could continue to get free lands amount that you would plow around in a day, and this would we accomplished many thousands of acres. We owned from the South Edisto River below Springfield to the North Edisto River, which was around Sebring above Wagener. And of course, this was all these 50,000 acres ended up belonging to the Salley family. The third Salley was, his name was Jacob, and he married Elizabeth Corbett. The fourth one was Howell Jones, not Howell Jones, Howell Jones Salley, and his wife also was a Corbett. But the next one was Howell Allen Salley, and his wife was Eugenia Hasseltine Corbett, and then was Francis Eugene Salley, whose wife was Ella Phillips, and she died and married Carrie Price Phillips, whose mother was a Salley. And then my father was Hemrick N. Salley Jr., and then me. I'm an 8th generation. It's hard for me to remember those now. I've never married. My father married Ena Boylston. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about them. These pictures you see of them, mother had had a stroke when she was 90 and a half, a very severe cerebral hemorrhage, and never was the same. They both were Aiken County judges and served around 40 years together. And they were very much humanitarians for our county. My position in life was I was a pharmacist, and I had several jobs. I first did my internship with my uncle, Dr. Cockfield, in Florence, South Carolina, and then went to Wannamaker Drug Company, whose were cousins, and they let me work free both of those places. So I didn't make much money there, and then I was the director of pharmacy. And then Cohn's Drugstore in Williston. Dr. Cohn was a medical doctor and a pharmacist. I worked there for 3 years, and then a very short time I was director of pharmacy of the Orangeburg Hospital, but I had to face the sun every day coming from Salley, and that was very difficult. So I chose to come to Aiken, and I was director of pharmacy there 30 years, but I remained there as a consultant for a total of 42 years and was in charge of the medicine for those 30 years and remained there, as I said, as a consultant. That's all I have to say about that. This tape, I'm introducing a young boy, and his name is Kevin Hemrick Swap. And this is my daddy's great niece, this child, which would be a great nephew, who's named after us. And they live in Virginia now, but they have lived there a good while. But she lived at one time, the mother lived in Salley and in Aiken. But my daddy's sister was Aunt Emma Jean Salley Gillum, who would have been this child's mother's grandmother. Thank you so very much for listening to me and taking up this time. All right, it came to mind that I need to tell you some other things. I had shut off the gentleman that's helping me shut off the machine, but I need to tell you a few more things. I wanted to tell you my father's brothers and sisters' names. Daddy had a whole sister named Emma Jean Salley Gillum, and they lived in Spartanburg. She married Louis Gillum and had Sis Gillum, Louis Gillum Jr., and Buddy Gillum. And then he had a brother named Brian that was killed, was shot to death in a controversial thing in the Salley area. It was very sad. And then he had a little teeny baby sister that died about the same time that his mother died after childbirth. And then he had a half-brother who was Dr. Francis Salley, a medical doctor and a surgeon. And he had 2 stepbrothers. This Carrie Price Morrison married my father the second time, and she had 2 sons, Dr. Wilson Morrison, who was a medical doctor, who married the daughter of Dr. Dowling from North South Carolina. And they had 2 children. And then there was Clark Morrison, and he had 1 son, Clark Morrison Jr. Now that's Daddy's people. And Mother's family was, she had 2 brothers, Roy and Leonard, who died when they were young children. And then my grandmother had another son who was Dr. Mott James Boylston, who was a dentist in Salley, who married Marion Pitts, and she was a musician, and my uncle was a dentist, and they had no children, and they were like second parents to me, and I loved them just like parents. And they lived next door to us all my life. They had a bungalow there on Walnut Street by Mama and Daddy's bungalow. My father and mother's, the old plantation house burned during the Great Depression times, and there was no insurance, so it was very difficult times, and they built this bungalow in Salley downtown to live. We still have our farm, our home place, and it's called now the Hemrick Salley Plantation Site, and it's on highway between, we own halfway between Salley and Perry. Salley was not originally called Salley, it was called Johntown after Mr. John Salley, Mr. John Corbett, and Mr. John Prothero. Prothero was also a Swiss German name, but the Salleys were there first, and these other two names came second, and then the Boylstons and many other fine families, which someday I will try to name all them for you, but I can't today without writing them down. I wanted to say that the battle, after Salley was doing pretty good in 1735, in 1782, the Battle of the American Revolution was fought there, which we have a monument down on Johntown Hill. And it was also called the Battle of Johntown, the Battle of Dean's Bridge. It was called several things. It's not in our history book now because there are so many very unimportant things that we have to put in history now that they forget the fine old things. It was Miss Mary Sims Oliphant. It's in her history book, and also Mr. Sims' History of South Carolina. I did want to say too that Captain Salley, the main march, one of Sherman's main marches from Savannah to Columbia, came through our area too, and Captain Salley, big fine home, was burned because he was a captain in the Civil War. He later, in 1882, the railroad was a branch off of the very first railroad in America. The first railroad in America was from Charleston to Hamburg. Well, this was a branch that branched off of that in 1882, which was called the Blackville-Alston Railroad Company, and it went from Blackville to Severn. That was above Wagener. And Severn had a lot of chalk, and it was very important in the making of milk of magnesia, and that was a very important new medicine that not maybe necessarily new, I don't know the discovery date, but magnesia was used as an antacid and a laxative and all kind of other ailments of our bodies. But that branch, after it became less popular, was taken away from the Wagener area, but it remained in Salley to just a few years ago. And how these names came about, Mr. Salley named one of the stations, being a vice president of the railroad, this Blackville-Alston Railroad Company, after himself, Salley, in 1882. And he named the other two towns after Mr. Perry, who was a vice president from Charleston, and Mr. Wagener, who was a vice president from Charleston. That's how they became names of their names. I think that's about all I can think of right now. Yeah, but I know where this man lives, that I can have some more things done. Thank you, and I wish for you all God's blessings after hearing this message, all that listen. I'm sorry that I make mistakes since I'm in my 75th year. I wish I were perfect like I was a few years ago. Ha ha. But anyhow, I was speaking of Leonard and Roy, my mother's brothers and sisters. two brothers that died young. Well, she also had, this third child was Dr. Mott James Boylston, which I told you that. Now, the fourth was Kathleen Boylston Davis, and Kathleen married Tom Davis, and they had only one daughter, Frances Elizabeth Davis Knowles, and she is fondly called by me Frankie, and I love her very much. She's my only first cousin in Salley. And my next is Aunt Mattie, and her name was Mattie Boylston Cockfield. She married Dr. Tris Van Cockfield of Florence, and they had two daughters, Nancy Cockfield Harwell and Martha Jo Cockfield Hill the first time, and Dr. Jack Richardson the second time. And Aunt Mamie Crum Boylston Morrison of Atlanta, who married Alden Morrison, and they had two sons, Marion Alden Morrison and Mott Morrison of Atlanta. And I wanted to tell you correct about the railroad. I messed up on that. On the railroad, it was not in 1882 it came through Salley's Perry and Wagener. It came in 1887. Where the 82 came from. So I'm very sorry, I'm slipping a little bit. Thank you. I would like to say one more thing. I learned at a very early age, before my mother married my father, she married a gentleman from Atlanta. She went to Atlanta to teach when she was young. After she finished Queens, she was at Queens College. It was then Shakora in Columbia, but she went, after going to school, she went to Atlanta to teach. And she met this wonderful man she fell desperately in love with. His name was Smith Golden, and he was a Jewish gentleman. And she married him, and they came to Salley to marry, and that was quite different for the Salley folks because we had no much experience with Jewish people. But my mother loved him so my grandparents agreed for her marriage, and they married, had a home wedding in Salley. And they went back to Atlanta, and he had a very bad pain in his jaw, and they went to a dentist, and he had an impacted wisdom tooth, which was lanced, and he took blood poison, and this was in 1928, and he died in 3 days. And my mother was devastated, and this was before sulfur, which came out, I think, in 1930. And so people died from infections and things. So when I was young, my mother taught me that all faiths in this world, faiths, that's hard for me to say, should be respected. So I learned at a very young age to, as a Christian, my king is Jesus, and I'm very fond of him, and he allows me to have what knowledge I have, and everything that I own and have, I give credit to him. I have nothing, and I am nothing without him. I fall so short. But I respect all faiths, and whatever your faith might be, respect it and honor it, and be honorable to other people's faiths. Thank you.
This thing's old, and I don't know if it's gonna.
You're a really nice guy to spend your Saturday afternoon with. My children would have complained all over the place.
before, I don't think.
You haven't? It's Hink and Nina.
Huh?
Hink and Nina.
Yeah. Hey, Pop, I ain't seen you in a long time. My name. Go ahead.
Maybe I should read it.
Break that camera, she won't take nobody else's picture.
You done broke it? Now tell who you are.
I am Hink's and Ina's great niece, Ann. And Imogene Salley Gillum was my grandmother.
Look at the camera. She wants to see your smiling face. I'm Eula Boylston. I've seen a Boylston. It's great to see you.
Good. We've been married over 70 years.
Is that right? That's how old is Ina?
Yeah. We married in 31.
Hank, how old?
Been a darling wife.
Yes, she has. How old is Ina?
Yeah.
Hey, Ina. How you doing? Happy anniversary. You sure are dressed.
Very good.
Now tell who he is.
His name is, tell him who your name is now.
My name's Hemrick.
Hemrick Swat.